so much. Thank you, Jim, and thank you all for having me. Oftentimes when I've spoken and been involved in a lot of the Heartland and CEI events, I've brought T-shirts. So Jim said, well, where's the T-shirts to throw out? I said, I'm just going to throw out pencils today. So everyone get ready, all right? Another time. No, honestly, I'm really honored and delighted to be here for the showing what really is a truly remarkable film. You know, look around for a second. This room, all this wealth, these pencils, this production equipment, the drinks in the back, this doesn't just spring out of the earth. You know, it has to be produced. And iPencil, as you're going to see, demonstrates that, once again, as we know, free market capitalism produces the goods. It creates the wealth. Through specialization of labor, competitive trades, we know capitalism provides the greatest standard of living, the highest quality, the longest number of years life, the greatest amount of wealth for anyone who's fortunate enough to be part of it. But what I think iPencil also demonstrates, as you'll see, is that at the heart of any free market, there is in any relentless interchange of trade, of exchange, it's all selfish. Everyone involved in this movie tonight, as you'll see, the creation, the production, the shipment, the delivery, the use of the pencil, everyone is out for him or herself. You know, they're either working for a paycheck, they're working to gain market share, they need something to write with. Everyone is acting out of his or her own self-interest. And this really is opposite to today's culture. It's directly opposite today's culture. I mean, what are we told in today's culture? To be selfish, to be out for yourself is not good, it's actually bad. You know, if you're making money, someone else is harmed. So, you know, being out for your own success, whether it's in your business or whether it's in pencil making, is a fundamentally bad thing. So therefore, of course, we know we need to spread the wealth around, to quote the president. We need to cut out the middleman, something the president's also talked about when it comes to student loans. You know, and even, of course, if you do succeed, if you do make great pencils, well, you didn't build that, right? So government has to come in and make sure that you're paying your fair share. You know, if you say that you're selfish today, if you say that, yeah, I'm out for myself, my own self-interest, I mean, the assumption is that you're a destructive, uncaring, murderous brute. You know, you're just ready to mow down the poor, you know, minorities, uneducated, the union, just anyone. You're ready to mow the needy, just sacrifice anyone to your needs, to your ends. I mean, the only question really is how many corpses are you going to have to trample over on your way to a fat paycheck? And of course, that's a false alternative. And I think that's what this movie so brilliantly and beautifully illustrates. You know, this idea that you can either be moral by sacrificing yourself to other people and agreeing to all the higher controls, higher taxes of a controlled and mixed economy, or you can be selfless and make everyone else sacrifice to you. But, you know, either way, they say someone has to be exploited, and that, of course, is not true. And that's what I find to be the most beautiful thing about this movie. You'll see how many different relationships work together, all the thinking, the precise calculation, the judgment, the knowledge that goes into it. And, you know, there are no corpses. There are no sacrifices. Profit-seeking free markets don't mandate that anyone sacrifice themselves to anyone else. Everyone is free to pursue his or her own self-interest. So you'll see there's no pencil implement writing accountability board. There's no Sharpie czar or pencil czar in the movie tonight. There's no regulatory mandate that says, look, everyone has to buy just at least 2 pencils so we can keep these pencil companies, you know. There's no constitutional right to a pencil. And of course, what has the free market done? It's made a pencil basically virtually free. If you get a pencil with some company's name on it, you can get it for free. Only the selfish achievements of millions of individuals acting in their own self-interest can achieve that. And as you'll see tonight, it's beautiful. It is truly beautiful. In the world of pencils, yes, but also in the world of healthcare, of science, of technology, of cuisine, of theater, of art, of every element of human life, in every human relationships in the world, period. So I congratulate CEI for producing the film. Thank all of you for being here. And with that, enjoy iPencil. Thank you.
This is the world we live in. If we weren't surrounded by it every day, if we didn't take it for granted, we'd be dumbstruck by its very intricacy and brilliance. This is an ordinary, familiar wooden pencil. You might think a pencil is simple. Chances are you've been using one since before you could even read or write. But just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's simple. In fact, it's complicated, elaborate, beautiful, elegant. Its very existence is too improbable for any one person to truly comprehend. These are the basic materials that go into a pencil: graphite, cedar, metal, and rubber. But if you had all the elements of a pencil right in front of you, could you make a pencil? It's not as easy as you might think. In fact, no single person on the face of the earth could do it without the help of countless others. And this is the key to understanding the world. A pencil, just like you and me, is the end result of a vast and intricate family tree, a symphony of human activity that spans the globe. Through their work and knowledge, a vast number of people have had a hand in making this simple pencil. Unlike your family tree, this one begins with an actual tree. The most immediate ancestor of the pencil is a cedar tree in the Pacific Northwest. But the loggers who harvest the timber are also its ancestors. And these men don't work alone. They in turn are assisted by the people and industries that produce the saws, rope, and countless other tools that they use. These are also the ancestors of our pencil. As is the waitress at a nearby diner who sells the loggers lunch, to say nothing of the thousands of people involved in producing that simple midday meal. Across time and space, the web grows. Consider the roads, trucks, ships, communication systems, and the people who design, build, and maintain them. All of them are necessary to bring the lumber to the mills and the slat factories that process them. All of them are also the ancestors of the pencil. And even with the work of all these people, so far all we have is a stained wooden slat, a naked half of a wooden body of a pencil. But its family tree is larger and more extensive. The graphite is mined in China and Sri Lanka. At the pencil factory, it's mixed with clay and heat and other materials before it's extruded, dried, and baked in a kiln. People from different continents, different cultures, cooperate to bring these materials together with waxes and kilns and equipment from across the world. These too are the ancestors of the pencil. And the same is true of the eraser. With ingredients from around the world, it's the end result of a similarly complex and exotic branch of the family tree. As is the ferrule, the metal band made from material that is mined, refined, and shipped from all over the world. Each part of the pencil is the result of the collaboration and cooperation of millions of people. Together, they form a process that is constantly changing and adapting. A change in the availability or cost of material from one place might make another source more desirable, and the process changes and adapts fluidly. And there is a fact that's still more astounding: the absence of a mastermind, of anyone dictating these countless actions which bring a pencil into being. Each member of this family tree supplies only a small amount of the necessary know-how needed to make a pencil. They do so voluntarily, not because they necessarily want pencils or like pencils, but because by working to create them, they exchange their labor and skills for the wages that let them buy what they want and need. What you're seeing is the market at work. The spontaneous configuration of creative human energies, of millions of people with their various skills and talents organizing voluntarily in response to human necessity and desire, as if led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of the intention. Every second we are alive, we benefit from the products of voluntary, spontaneous cooperation. This is the modern world. It's miraculous, it's intricate, and it gets better every day, so long as people are free to interact with each other. If we can leave the creative energies of humankind uninhibited, there's no limit to what we can accomplish.
Noticed, but one of the loggers looked mysteriously like Joe Bast, president of Heartland. So I'm not going to say that was intentional or not, but we'll just let all of those cameos speak for themselves. My son, who's an 18-year-old snarky version of me, frankly, made a comment when he saw it. He goes, "Dad, that was great, but I use mechanical pencils." Like, you know, what more can I say? The principles still apply. Let me just say just a few words about this and who CEI is and why this matters to us. And then Fred Smith, who actually is the most recent and the only most recent president and founder of CEI, who I should disclose was actually in charge when the movie was made. I inherited it. So it's a much better position to be in, by the way, to inherit it than to have gone through producing it. But Fred is now the director of our Center for Advancing Capitalism. So it gives you a sense of that. And then Jonathan and we're all going to take some questions about the movie and anything else you want to talk about, why the Nationals are going to win the World Series, this kind of a thing. If you want a context for the movie, it's as simple as this. It's the power of story and the power of narrative. And the fact that narrative and story are applicable in politics. In case anybody hadn't noticed, there was an election last fall. And I know for a fact that there are still many more Republicans than not, who are waking up every morning and imagining, I still can't believe that Barack Obama is president of the United States. Well, I mean, yes, it is. And the narrative that's unfolding as the Republican Party begins to eat its young and try to explain why everything happened was, well, it was a political consultant class that did it. It was a bad campaign. It was, you never had a good candidate. Someone said the wrong thing. It was this and that sort of a thing. And there are elements of truth in that. But the reality is, the way I view it, the narrative that I hear in the story that unfolds is as simple as the fact that in the midst of the worst economic crisis in modern history, the President of the United States and his allies convinced Americans that Washington, D.C. is a better steward of your life, liberty, and property than Americans are themselves. And guess what? That narrative won. That's a hard thing to swallow sometimes. And there's lots of reasons why, in fact, that's the case. There's other sub-narratives that are out there about fear in society and the fact that we lack economic literacy these days. And I came from George Mason, so I can't help but say there's a public choice element of at least explain some of it, not all of it. And those are all truthful. But one of the powerful narratives that we've seen the last 5 to 8 years is the notion of cronyism as it has creeped into essentially what used to be a free enterprise system. And it's nothing more, of course, than private interests at the trough of the public using goods that were not otherwise earned they should not have. And it takes on many variations. You know, we see businesses that spend far more time courting policymakers on how to get the referee to favor, obviously, them over competition. We see entrepreneurs that spend far too much time more or less trying to figure out new ways to find privilege, and as a result are not spending any time trying to understand how to maximize value for not just shareholders, but consumers. And this has led to a system, frankly, that is turning on its head. And there are other stories and narratives that come out. So the question is, where does this fit within CEI's own story? You know, our response is to be very diverse in our narrative, and very diverse in who reaches, who we are trying to reach with these powerful stories. CEI, for the sake of those who do not know, is what we call a full-service think tank. That means we do the think tanky things. We think. We write, we have analysis, but we combine that with a marketer's ability to cajole and advertise and harass and litigate as necessary to make sure that our principles and our findings make it, in fact, into narratives that reach people who can perhaps do something about it. As one of my general counsel, or my only general counsel, said, we don't just think, we do stuff. Well, Heartland does stuff too, so it's nice to be in the company of other do-stuffers, if that's a word. And the reality is we take all that policy work on energy and the environment and immigration and trade and pharmaceuticals and chemicals and everything under man, and we, in fact, create coalitions. We then create advocacy campaigns. We work with the media. We do Hill briefings. We do press releases. We do blogs. We do social media. We do letter writing campaigns. We oppose presidential nominations for various cabinet secretaries, and we produce 4 or 5 minute cartoons on the power of free enterprise. And if we don't make any progress with that, frankly, we sue the U.S. government. And, you know, I have to say that part's kind of fun. You know, I didn't get to do that at George Mason University. George Mason University suing the U.S. government would have different kinds of consequences for its public university status. And so in the last couple of months, we are now the lead filer, if you will, to overturn some of the Dodd-Frank financial services bill. We have 13 states that have come on board that. We, just a week and a half ago, refiled one of our challenges to the Obamacare with some of the IRS issues. And for those who've been following, we have been using FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, to harass the Environmental Protection Agency so much that in the last, I think it's about 3 or 4 months, we now have 4 EPA officials who have resigned, including the administrator. And then Gina McCarthy, who is currently up for nomination, her hearing, confirmation hearing, is being delayed because of our FOIA requests, et cetera. So, you know, it's I like to say scholarly gadfly is an important role that we try to fit. But you know, why we do this, why we litigate, why we have fun in courtrooms, and it's also an uphill battle. Let's not minimize that. And strategic litigation is great, and policy analysis and advocacy is all good. But the real challenge that we face is really this burgeoning idea of regulation. And CEI focuses almost all its work on regulation. And if you weren't really paying attention to politics the last 6 months or 10 months, if you've not read or listened to the President's State of the Union address or his post-election address, he's very clear on what his agenda is, and it is decidedly a non-free enterprise, anti-regulatory agenda. We just released yesterday, as part of the think tank part, a new analysis on the compliance costs of regulation. It's called 10,000 Commandments. And Wayne Cruz, our Vice President for Policy, is doing a great job with that. And so it's now online, and you can look that up. But one of the frustrating facts that's coming out of that is compliance costs right now in the United States are about $1.8 trillion. And economically significant regulations are up 10% in the last, or 21% in the last 10 years. This is not just an Obama administration. This goes back to the previous administration as well, if we're going to be honest. In 2011, Congress passed 11 laws, which is 11 laws too many. But the federal agencies wrote 4,000 new rules. Last year alone, there were 800 new rules for businesses with fewer than 2 employees. That's not a lot of employees when you're down to mom and dad, and you know the dog might even count as one. But the point being is that this is sort of the world that we are entering in, and the cost of that is much greater than some of the budget and deficit conversations that we have because of the impact and what's being lost from the investment standpoint. That's, I think, the greatest frustration. Our purpose at the end of the day is to remove what we see as government-created barriers to entrepreneurship and innovation and economic freedom. That's what we do every day. That's why we do it. And whether it's a sophisticated economic analysis of the compliance costs or being a pain in the you-know-what in the classroom or making sure we have interactive websites that citizens and analysts can sort of get more information from, whether we make T-shirts or lapels or even we produce 4 or 5 minute videos on the power of free enterprise. It's that collective story making that's actually the most effective at the end of the day, and that we need to do more. And being able to work with Heartland and others is critical in that as well. We all need to be telling our stories far more effectively. I came across, and I'll end with this, a quotation that my son picked up the other day that it both inspires me but also angers me. And it's Thomas Jefferson who said a few years ago, I predict future happiness for Americans if they can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them. That to me is the epitome of where we are now. And if CEI and others can have a little revolt every now and then and try to deal with that, that's an inspiration that I think is worth doing. So thank you for coming. Thank you for enjoying the film. We have a few more films planned in the series. And I think with that, we're going to take some general questions about the who and the why and why the Nationals are going to win the World Series. So.
So Fred, John, and Lawson will take your questions. Please raise your hand, and now we'll bring you a microphone.
Hi, that was very inspirational and enjoyable. I've read the book and consider it a classic, and I think should be in the backpack of every college student. Well, I gave it to my niece. High school would be even better, but on this film, you had Walter Williams, who I think does an exceptional job of presenting what are considered complicated economic principles in very easily understandable everyday terms. And given the rise of the phenomenon of what has become known as the low information voter, which includes college educated, I might add, we need to find a way to quickly and easily explain our message. I know you're doing some of that, but it seems like we're going to have to do a lot more than we have been. I just wonder if any of you have any thoughts on how we can step that up.
Well, I didn't plant that question, but it's a very critical one. People, there's a general argument in our movement, just because we're right, do we have to lose all the time? That frustration I think all of us feel, and I think part of it is because we're trying to educate the low-interested voter, the low-interested citizen, rather than recognizing they have many other things in the world, and their ability to, it's not working, and their ability to read large numbers of white papers is very limited. So we're going to have to reach the relatively uninterested, relatively ignorant, in a positive sense, voter, electorate, and so on down the line. And they don't care what we know until they know we care. And so our challenge is to find a narrative, a strategy that can reach them in a way that conveys that our policies are compatible with their values. This, in a way, is an attempt to do that. If you notice, it goes around the world showing people, we didn't show them all, but obviously these are Asians, these are Africans, these are people throughout, they're women, they're men, they're of all kinds, and so on, and they're all working in a cooperative way, a positive image of capitalism and so on. There's a lot of other stories like that we need to tell, but I think you're absolutely right. In effect, our challenge is to recognize that if we believe our product, economic liberty, is a good one, we have to find narratives that can express those, not to us, we're convinced already, but to those outside our church. And I think it's possible to do that, and there's a lot of material on this that I could talk to you about. It's one of my passions right now. So yes, you're absolutely right.
And please identify yourself, and if you're with an organization too, please.
My name is Jim Lakely. I'm David Applegate. I'm a longtime non-native Chicagoan, and I agree with everything that's been said except for two. One is why the Nationals are going to win the World Series. And the second is that we are going to win elections through the power of ideas. There's no question that our ideas are better. We are going to win elections by turning out people who believe in our ideas. And if having a community organizer in the White House is not enough to wake people up to that, then this country as we know it is over. In the long run, absolutely, I agree. Education is the key. Winning hearts and minds, getting people to understand that capitalism is better for them, that free markets and individual choice is better than government-mandated edicts about what citizens may do, where they may live, what they may drive, what kind of toilets they may flush, anything else you want to name. But time is short, gentlemen. It is very, very short. And if people inside the Beltway and outside Chicago do not understand and get that message, then this country as a self-governing republic is absolutely over. So the absolute most important thing we can do in the next 2 years is to organize, get our voters out, forget the other voters, get our voters out, make sure that we hold the House. Don't worry about winning back the Senate. I've heard that so many times. It's you know, in the next generation that may happen, but it's not going to happen in 2014. It's not going to happen in 2016. And then we can worry about the White House down the road. But let's hold the House, let's organize, let's adopt the tactics of the other side, except those that are illegal, no double voting, no illegal, non-citizens, none of that stuff. But let's get our people out. Let's continue to preach the ideas, let's continue to educate, let's continue to motivate, but we are not going to win the political struggle through the power of ideas. We have got to hold the House, we have got to win elections, and then we can continue in the mission of educating the people, where this experiment in self-government is going to be over after 200 plus years, which historically has been the lifetime of democracies in the history of civilization.
Does the gentleman have a question?
My question is, who wants to see me after the meeting?
Care to comment on that?
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, and predicting election turnout is not my forte, but I think the reason, in my opinion, that the capitalists keep losing is that we keep making the efficiency argument, if you will. We keep pointing to the fact that, hey, capitalism produces the goods, and there's no discrepancy, I think, among that, even among those on the left. They would reluctantly say, yeah, I guess I know free markets. I think what we have to really advocate for, in my opinion, is the moral justification of capitalism, of self-interest. Really, is what it is. I mean, that's the thing again about the community organizer these days in a poll would rank a lot higher than the businessman, than the capitalist, because the assumption is that if the capitalist is profiting, someone else is losing. If you're doing well, someone else is getting screwed. Again, that life involves and requires sacrifice, either other people sacrificing for you or you sacrificing for other people. And of course, that's the philosophical foundation on which all this shit has been passed, Obamacare on down the line. So I mean, I think it's, in my opinion, it really is trying to make that moral argument that you say to young people, not as our current administration does, you need to put a little aside for the next generation. You're part of this grand family tree. Sacrifice yourself for the greater good, and so young people can say, no, I'm out for myself. I want to be a success for my life and engage in that free, open trade that we all want.
There has been a historical divide, I'm not sure it was intentional or not, but it is, between the larger, and let's use the word think tank generally, think tank community, at least in the center-right, that frankly has not applied our own market principles to ourselves of specialization, comparative advantage, limited knowledge that we don't all each and don't always have. And the think tank world has not always involved itself with the more active political side of things. And again, I'm not sure it's been intentional, but you're seeing the ramifications of that now. And so I think as Heartland and CEI and many other groups recognize that part of what we can do is provide better stuff that's and again, our argument isn't going to do it if no one's pulling the lever. And so there's a lot more cooperation now, I think, within the scholarly community, the political community, and variations thereof, recognizing that good politics is an important exercise just as much as good economics is.
There's a tendency, I think, for there's a lot of moral justifications for economic liberty. One is the the value that Jonathan's pointed out, the value that you own yourself and you have the right to the earnings of your body and so on down the line. That persuades some people, but it doesn't persuade everyone at all. I think capitalism is a much richer field than that. In fact, the video showed that in part. This goes back to the question that I tried to answer with a young woman a few minutes ago. America is a diverse nation. We do not all share the same values. But we could share an agreement about the policies that advance our values. The example, of course, is that in Europe, Catholics and Protestants had severe value differences. My relatives were Catholics, and Catholics looked at the Protestants realizing they were endangering their immortal souls, and the Catholics went to them and tried to reason with them, but Protestants just weren't very thoughtful people, so they didn't convert. They said, well, look, haven't you realized the Bible? I am Peter, upon this rock I shall build my church, and the whole historical evidence. You've got to be Catholic. Protestants didn't understand history as well as we Catholics did, and so that didn't persuade them. And then Catholics did an argument that worked quite well: become a Catholic or I'll kill you, I'll shoot you. And that worked pretty well, but of course Protestants had guns too, and the result of that was the religious wars that millions of people on value distinctions tried to massacre each other. They did massacre each other. When America was settled, we decided that religion was a precious value. People had a right to believe whatever they believed, but there would be one difference. We were going to separate church and state. You couldn't kill each other anymore. And as a result, not only did we create a more tranquil society, we created the only society in Western area which still has a vibrant religiosity. And we did it, in fact, because we required that values compete. Our values of economic liberty need to compete with the values of egalitarianism and the values of stability and security. There's a whole literature out there on how cultural values can compete. The major way I think they can compete is by our creating narratives that show how economic liberty does not only advance the values that Jonathan and most of us have of making us free individual entities, but also makes it possible the most stable, resilient society in the history of the world, and, as Joseph Schumpeter said, a society that has done more to advance egalitarian values than anything in the world. Schumpeter, as some of you will know, said, capitalism wasn't necessary to provide the kings and queens of Europe with silk stockings. They had them. It was to provide the shop girls of England the opportunity to provide those. Capitalism is not only a freedom virtue, it's also a stability order virtue, it's also an egalitarian fairness virtue, and we have to find ways of communicating all of those values. They don't have to be our value. We want to bring these people into our church, as it were. If they sit in different pews, who the hell cares? They've got to get there in order that we can bring them on to support the policies that are essentially freedom is to survive.
You're absolutely correct, sir. But 99% of voters would not understand the word you said.
Well, let me assure you, this is an intellectual audience. There's a difference between trying to find ways of reaching people who have a deep concern over ideas and spend time. But in all honesty, we're not normal people. Most people have real lives. They don't read white papers. They don't read policy things. They go to ball games. They watch their kids where they're going to school. They're checking their homework. Most people are, the term is not less informed. I would use the term rationally ignorant. People aren't stupid because they're stupid because they're smart. They rationally allocate their time. And if we try to make them smart, we're being stupid. We can't educate the American people, but we sure as hell can communicate to them, and we aren't spending enough time doing it.
Identify yourself.
Donna Rook with Truth in Accounting. My question up front is, I am looking for ideas on selling this to the 20-somethings and everyone else who's getting stuck with the tab. I'm going to give you time to think because I'll give you background. Okay, Truth in Accounting has done the only asset liability inventory for all 50 states. Everybody's hung up on pensions. There's more liabilities. In Illinois, there's bonds. There's retirement health in all 50 states. It's bigger than pensions across the 50 states. There's assets that can be used. Not enough in most states. So we do the netting out. Taxpayer burden in Illinois, what's left is $38,500, which is 80% of the average income. So we found some stuff that we can sell, and I want more ideas to sell, okay? Here's what we have. I'll share our ideas, and I'm looking for more. What we found is states that have bigger taxpayer burdens have less docs willing to accept Medicaid, so services are suffering. They're paying their service providers, their nonprofits more slowly. And my personal idea is tell the 20-somethings they don't want the government telling them what to do any more than they want their parents what to do. Those are my ideas. I'm looking for more.
How do we say that you're a speech? They've been lying to us. I guess that's one reason.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, I don't have a great response for you. I'm not familiar with your organization. Those 20-somethings are the ones, at least that I deal with, are the ones that have been told since their teenage years that they need to sacrifice themselves. That if they would be hard pressed, I think, to say, I'm not going to throw that old pensioner out. I'm not going to cut his benefits. How can we have him? They're the ones I think that are unfortunately most affected by this altruistic ideology that says you have to sacrifice yourself. And if those bonds have been racked up, it must have been for a good reason, and I have to give a little bit more. But I admire you in terms of trying to bring the message to young people, because that's where these concepts are formed. So the younger, the better. Actually, I think it's what makes iPencil so effective, is that it's perfect for high school. I think it still works for college. Even for us a few years out of college, it resonates as well.
I have a son who's leaving soon, so because of his mechanical pencil comment, that's why. I think the challenge with the 20-somethings is the zero-sum game mentality that is particularly pervasive, and when one is thinking of regulatory effect and pension liability and burden of debt on household, they're just not, those are terminologies that's a dad terminology. It's not a 20-something terminology. And it's rare to find the child who's sort of thinking those things until they start to actually work and recognize things and see parts of their paycheck that they don't see. And this kind of a thing. And it's unfortunate that it's when they start to have certain experiences that reality begins to change. I use as an example, and she knows I do this, my mother is 74 years old, and when she finally went on to Medicaid, she called me one day and she said, I've had 3 surgeries on my eyes and this sort of thing, and I've never seen a bill. And I said, I know, because I've been paying it for the last 30 years. And she said, I don't understand. And we had and my mother now has done a complete 180 on the issue. It's like, okay, you don't have that many voting years left, moms. Let's get going and see if we can catch up. But anyway, that's a separate conversation, so.
We're doing a little work in that area at CEI, but the 20-somethings, remember, not only are the pension debts, they're going to incur incredibly high student loans because they don't quite understand. I mean, if a private party gave an 18-year-old a $100,000 debt, saying, don't worry, you'll be able to pay it off, without any requirement they take a course that actually had earning power, they'd go to jail. But in government, we consider it as a noble act of wonderful patronage for the government. The fraud of government is still hard to expose, and that's the problem you face.
Hi, my name is Kevin Truitt, and it's a comment, not so much a question. Going back to what Jonathan said, the problem with the way we approach this is that we are arguing on the left's or the socialists, progressives, Democrats' home turf. They argue for morality. We argue logic and facts. The way to address that issue is to simply ask one basic question. Is it moral to turn a group of people or anyone into permanent dependents? That's how you deal with that, because that's exactly what happens. All the people who were forced into or led into public housing, if they knew that for the next 3 generations, they, their children, and grandchildren were going to be the serfs of the government and permanent dependents, I can guarantee you that's not a deal they would have taken. So what has to happen is people need to be made aware of the fact that government dependency is not moral.
Can I just quickly respond? I agree. You know, we then need to get the chutzpah to be able to get on, when you get on national TV and someone says to you, so you telling me, Jonathan, that you're going to throw that AIDS, cancer, and diabetes patient kid out on the street if his parents didn't save and he's got nothing? You telling me you're just going to throw him out on the street? In my opinion, we need to be able to say yes. I really do. I think you need to be able to get to the point of saying yes, of saying I'm not responsible for other people, their health care, their education, or any of these big government monster programs that we know fail.
Can you replace church with street? That might go over better.
I think that in effect, those of us who have ever thought seriously about marketing realize you can have a wonderful product, and if you haven't not only developed marketing strategies, but then tested those marketing strategies out through focus groups, through test marketing and so on, you very well may find yourself ending up having built a better mousetrap, a wonderful mousetrap, with warehouses full of unsold mousetraps. We've been developing very good ideas in our movement, and we haven't sold many of them. I don't think it's obvious, and I don't think our own intuition is very good at following this. I think we need to develop marketing strategies for ideas and then try them out on test markets and see what works. Who knows? Maybe Jonathan's right. Maybe throwing grandma on the ice cake in a positive way can sell. But I'm in Washington, D.C., which is the least favorable test market for these kind of ideas. But I think there are ways of selling our ideas that sound, look, do any of you have liberal relatives? Okay. My sister-in-law is about as knee-jerk liberal as you get. And I try all kinds of ideas on her, and it doesn't work very well. My brother, who's also a knee-jerk liberal, when we were doing the iPencil video, he and his son, who's even more knee-jerk liberal than he is, agreed to watch it, and they watched an earlier draft, one about, sort of a beta draft of the video y'all saw, and he had 100 changes. I don't like this. I think that's bad. I looked at it and I saw none of those things. But when he explained it, I said, oh, I didn't mean to say that in a way that would offend him, but I did. And as a result, we changed it. And he looked at it when it was finally done and said, yeah, well, I guess it's okay. But that was infinitely better than what he had seen earlier. I think we really should be serious about liberty. And it's not enough to say, God damn it, I'm right, and I'll beat you over the head till you agree. I think we really have to recognize that when people, honorable people, disagree with us, we can't say that they're stupid. They may or may not be stupid. They may, in fact, never have. People do not hear what we say just because we've said it. It's very critical to find out what they hear, not what we've said, and that's going to take marketing research. And our movement does not have much interest in marketing, and I think we should, because it is. My wife had an example where she went to a conference and she talked about two young men who realized, oh my God, it was their mother's birthday. The first one ran into the supermarket, got 2 bars of Ivory soap, threw them in a paper bag, little brown paper bag, brought them home to Mom and said, Mom, happy birthday. Mom was not happy. The other brother said, oh my God, it's Mom's birthday, went into Casey's and Massey's, got 2 bars of soap and a beautiful 4-line thing with a ribbon on it, got a card, came home and gave it to Mom, and Mom says, oh, you're a lovable son. The soap was the same. It was wrapped differently. Why in the name of God are we so adverse to finding wrapping papers for the ideas of liberty, which are critical if we're going to win?
Hi, Tina DuPont, Tea Party of West Michigan. Yes, we did protest the IRS today in Grand Rapids. I have so many questions, but I think what we're doing in Michigan is working, but it's a little different because we're actually lobbying ourselves unpaid to our legislators, and we're winning. Right now, we have the healthcare exchanges on hold. We have the expansion on hold, and just various other things. But Somebody mentioned Common Core, I think, was it Heartland? You guys have? I'd love more information. We have a great rep that is fighting that right now, and we're doing really well. They've unfunded it, I think, at this point. But we have a governor who's a Republican, questionable, who he scares me. But I guess my real question is, have you all thought about trying to go with the 10th Amendment a little more? I love this, by the way, but what we're doing is trying to convince our state that there's a 10th Amendment and that they need to push back on the federal government. Do you have anything like that going on?
If there's any positive trend in the movement the last couple of years, it's actually the growth of the state policy-based sort of think tanks, and then the Tea Parties come into that as well. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. One is there's probably greater cynicism as it relates to what can be done about the federal government. And there is more greater opportunity for what can be done at the state government. And in fact, in many ways, it's your state government and state rules that have far greater effect sometimes on your pocketbooks and ability to do things than oftentimes Washington, D.C. At the same time, on the positive side of the ledger, there are state governments that are in many ways more innovative and can deal more directly with some of the initial problems they have. Some of the states, how they've dealt with labor law issues and pension funds and these sorts of things is an encouragement that maybe something can be done. And as a result, I think there's nationally been more focus actually on the states, not just pushing back in the Obamacare health exchange, which is a natural and logical one, and that's why we have so many states that have come on board our lawsuit for that reason. But it's partly been driven by fiscal realities, too. And so I actually am more optimistic about what the states can do than I am sometimes about my own backyard of Washington, D.C., which kind of defeats the entire purpose of why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I hadn't thought of that before 6 months ago. So, you know, we do a lot with state-level focused groups to make sure that the work that we are doing is applicable and can be used in that way. And certainly on the legal side, I think there has been and there will continue to be more use of 10th Amendment and others to actually specifically push back. I think it's well-deserved, and as a Virginian, I'm a little partial to the state issue, so even though I'm in the union club.
I forgot we got right to work, too.
By the way, ditto from the Heartland Institute on all of that. Mark?
John Klingner. I just want to bring up an earlier point saying it's quite funny that the left, which is so engaged in just attacking selfishness, has created the greatest Ponzi scheme in society and finances that the world has ever known. So everything's going to collapse, and they're the ones saying that sacrifice. Well, that's not what is happening. But back to the state level. Going back on a Milton Friedman quote, who said that the best way to make things work is to make the wrong people do the right thing. So my question is, okay, so if we can't beat the left, if we can't convince voters to go our way, is there a way to get the other side to, I guess, invoke their own idea of pragmatism? Because the situation is going to get worse and worse and worse. Will there be a point where they will be forced to listen to us, and is there a way we can persuade them to listen to us because their model just won't work anymore?
Well, the one example of that you're seeing already is in Rhode Island. You're seeing it in California in some of the municipalities. The non-sustainable pension funds, which are now draining resources from teachers' unions, from fire unions. So in a sense, one group of special claimants is fighting another group of special claimants. When the food gets short, cannibalism breaks out among the rats. And so, yeah, there is a real chance that that's going to happen. But that's negative view. The other one is, somebody was asking earlier about how do we market this. Some of you, have any of you seen the doorbell ad that was around during the election and so forth? It shows a doorbell ringing, and a mother with a young baby in her arms goes to the door, and she opens it, and you don't see anyone, but you hear a voice saying, hi, I'm from the government, and we just wanted to know that we're going to need a little bit more money. And the young mother, looking kind of, she says, well, I'm sorry, but we're a little tight already, and well, we've already paid our taxes. Yeah, well, it's going to be about $4,000 a year, or you could pay it in $80 or $90 a month, and it'll be for the next 58 years. And she said, are you out of your mind? I'll be 82 by then. How could I possibly pay that? And then the voice says, I wasn't talking to you. And then you see the baby in a close-up frozen shot. It's a very powerful motive because the immorality of making the babies of today be indebted at a level that most of us never encountered until we'd bought our first house is totally immoral. It can't be something that anyone, liberal, conservative, whatever, can feel good about, and yet we've done it by the kind of dishonest policies, Ponzi policies, that if they'd been done in the private sector, would have led companies to go to jail. And that, I take it, is a truth in accounting type thing. We need to have the truth in accounting. If government were required to meet the accounting standards that companies have to do, this fraud would be exposed everywhere. And in states that have to meet it, like Rhode Island, others, it's actually happening, and they're making changes. Now, you happen to be in a state where government ignores reality totally, but every other state, almost in America, I think, is beginning to go with pension reform. I have no idea what your state thinks you're doing.
The other positive aspect is we shouldn't underestimate the effects of the sequester, in that the world, last time I checked, did not collapse. Although I was not allowed to walk across Lafayette Park, by the way, which is a public block, in case anybody didn't know that. And at 5 p.m., it's now ringed by policemen because you're not allowed to walk through because of the sequester, even though there wasn't anybody there earlier, and now there are 30 policemen that ring it. So how does that work? Anyway, there was some political gambit, and there's some exceptions, and the FAA took advantage of the situation. But it has, at least in Washington, which may not be the best example, somewhat undermined the cry of alarm for what budget cuts will do to society. And I've seen that already in some of the debates taking place. That's a positive step.
Can I say one thing? I mean, the Ponzi's haven't been curtailed; they've actually been expanded. And again, I get back to my central point of tonight. How have they been expanded? I mean, Social Security started as, hey, everyone can sacrifice a little bit for the retirees. That, of course, Medicare started, oh, everyone could just go a little bit. How can you say no? I mean, I know I sounded a little shocking when I talked about the kids, the AIDS patient kid, but it's the same type of justification that was used then to sell Medicare, and then, of course, Medicaid, because the poor, you're going to throw the poor, and then now, of course, Obamacare. So it's again and again, we keep going back to that idea that, hey, everyone has to sacrifice him or herself for whatever that group is for the moment. So again, for me, I stick to that idea that you have to say, no, I have a moral justification to, of course, help any individual or group that I want to, but government has no right to sacrifice my life to help anyone else in their view. Thank you.
How you doing? Mark Weiermiller. I'm a low information voter. It's good because there's no expectation of me knowing anything, so I can just vote with my heart. But I see Jim's body language, like last question, please. So, and also keep it under 20 words. So I'll keep it under 20 words. I don't want to be outdone by the lady from Michigan. We had 200 people out at the IRS headquarters downtown today with Joe Walsh and Stephen Tucker, and very little news coverage. ABC was out there. A lot of video cameras, so hopefully something's on YouTube. So we were out there about 25 minutes, ranting and yelling, and hopefully we did some good. A lot of people stopped to watch. So my question, tying in this with the media, so a quick comment, that kind of your theme is to educate people and get all this. And by the way, for full disclosure, I'm an angry taxpayer. I have a small real estate business. I pay a lot of property tax in Chicago. I'm not a fan of Rahm Emanuel, or Governor Quinn, or Michael Madigan, or, so you talk about Washington, Chicago, we're kind of like worse than Washington, D.C. So I want to know your comments on the media. So you want to get the message out, but I see the media, so specifically this week, we were talking about Benghazi, the AP scandal, and what's the other scandal? IRS scandal, yeah, how did I forget that one? But then we have this tornado come in, and all of a sudden, we have the news cycle is completely over in Oklahoma. Obama's going to fly there and save some people, unbury some people from the rubble, and we're going to forget these 3 scandals. So I'm kind of, as far as the news cycle go, that's where we're at now. So you're talking about getting the message out. How do we get the media completely left-wing that's not going to be on our side? I see no hope until we get more media. So a quick comment on your thoughts on the left-wing media.
Joseph Schumpeter argued that the intellectual class mostly would find statism in their best interest. Mandarins, the intellectuals, would prefer a mandarinate, more power, more authority to them, okay? And what are the power slots in a modern society for intellectuals? They're the communication slots. That means the media. It means the academy. It means the pop culture. So you're absolutely right. Trying to send our message through channels controlled by those who view our positions as wrong is very, very difficult. But that's been true for a long time. The advantages we have is the internet, the YouTubes and so on, provide for the first time in our lifetimes an alternative communication channel that is broken, in a sense, the monopolized, channelized control of the past. And we also, at least in theory, have the ability of using the advertising world of business if business ever defended itself. They don't right now, but they could, and as not only are taxpayers on a melting cake of ice where the viability of survival or pension funds and so on are shrinking dramatically, but the business community is going from a world in 1880 which was 95% private to a world of today which is maybe, we're lucky, 50% private. Entrepreneurial ability of business to make money is shrinking. Maybe business will begin to join with us to fight back. We have to find a way to communicate to the low-involved voter like yourself. It doesn't actually sound like you're as low-involved as you say, but the other thing we realize is that even voters fib a bit, so we have to recognize that. No, I think, though, that, yes, the communication challenge is a very difficult one, but it's easier than it used to be, and in fact, there are alternative channels that we've barely begun to explore, the internet, and the business advertising world. When you speak to Joe and Joan consumer, and we spend $1 trillion a year doing that, we're also speaking to Joe and Joan citizen. If that message was, hey, we're producing products and we're sort of proud to do so, maybe in fact we'd be able to reach more people, at least with a positive message that capitalism's a good thing, not only for me, but also for the society in which we live.
I'm going to quickly just say, I mean, the media reflects the culture, and I think, we're extremists. If you're a capitalist and you believe in free markets, you're seen as an extremist these days. And unfortunately, I think that's the effort that we all need to do and that we're all doing in all of our individual contexts is trying to change that culture, legitimize what we stand for and what we believe in. And again, why I think things like iPencil are really effective is that especially with younger people, it really resonates and sticks with them. So unfortunately, I think the media is just a reflection of the greater culture, which is decidedly anti-capitalist and anti-freedom.
I have a slightly different perspective in that I don't disagree with the caricature of the media. I think 5 or 10 years from now, the media as we know it will be very, very different. And I look to, oddly enough, the sort of Arab Spring of North Africa and other aspects of the use of cell phones, of communication and Facebook and social media. Now that's not full-fledged analysis, but it's a communication style that blocked what was essentially the official newspapers and the official TVs. Well, we can almost view the U.S. has an official newspaper and official television because of its perspective. But the readership, I mean, we're almost to a point where there won't be written newspapers anymore. And the NPR is losing thousands and thousands of listeners on a regular basis, except for Car Talk, but let's be honest, Car Talk's so fun to listen to. And so it's my bigger issue is, do we, more importantly, do those who do not agree with us, will they ever find a mechanism that they would trust to get different perspectives? We've become so tribal, we just listen to what we like. And the same is true on the other side. And it almost doesn't matter what's being said at CNBC or NBC or CNN or even Fox News. And not that I'm trying to dig at Fox News, but it's not Fox News, it's Fox commentary. That's what it is. And that's not a bad thing, that's just what it is. And so I think the whole notion of what media is changing, and that provides an ability to sort of find mechanisms to get messages to different people. So.
We have time for one more question because we're going to leave the bar open until 8. That's the good news. So, ma'am, last question here.
Hi. I hope I still remember my question, but anyway, it was a great job done by that video. I will certainly recommend it to all my students. I teach at DePaul, and they need this kind of information. But I think it's something that is important to highlight in the free market. The power of free markets is competition, and there is also competition of ideas in the political spectrum. And this is something that I think the Republicans have failed to do in a successful way, selling the ideas of the free market. And I would like to know, from your perspective, what has been the biggest mistake done in marketing strategy terms from the Republican side in the last few elections? And most importantly, do you think it's time for Republicans to change direction on issues like women's right to choose and same-sex marriage, because at the end of the day, if we believe in free market, we do believe in free choice as well?
The answer is yes. In terms of the greatest mistake, I think going back to the gentleman's earlier question about sort of voter turnout, I'm not, sometimes it's just people not showing up to vote. I mean, numbers are what they are. Someone had actually said if it took a snapshot of the last presidential election and went back to 1984 with the same demographics, Ronald Reagan would never have won. It's a different electorate, it's a different way of voting. There's a utilitarian message that tends to come across, and it is that it is about tax laws and percentages and 1% and 99%. And it's been more of an intuitive kind of conversation, and it's not an emotive one. Not that everything should be an emotive one. And I'm not sure I could find one particular one, although, again, I will maybe lay my more libertarian card on the table. The Bush administration didn't help with the notion of sort of free markets. And when you have the collapse of the financial sector, and essentially the bailouts began, there's an important story that a lot of people don't know, that when the Bush administration sent up their request for essentially a bailout, there was a vote taken on Capitol Hill. Does anyone remember what happened? They turned it down. They turned it down actually fairly significantly. And because there was this sense of it doesn't feel right. And a month and a half later, the vote changed. And I know for a fact of friends of mine who were members of Congress at that time, that they called a lot of the friends at CEI and Heritage and Cato and my old organization, the Mercatus Center, and said, help us come up with an argument of why this is the wrong thing. And frankly, we were all caught off guard, and there wasn't anything, and it passed through. So it was, I never want to be unprepared like that again. We can't afford that. This is a long conversation. There is no question there is a libertarian conservative divide right now in the Republican Party. There's no getting around it. It is likely going to have a negative or positive effect, depending where you are, on the next few elections. And issues of choice, which as we deal in a free society, are going to have to be dealt with. And it's getting rather contentious. And as one at CEI, which has been in the middle of a lot of that, and I have personally, it's been an interesting baptism by fire.
Does anyone want to leave us on a high note?
One little argument, though, that makes it, look, there's a lot of differences within the conservative movement, the conservatives versus libertarians and so on. But I'm on the board of the American Conservative Union, which is certainly a very minority libertarian in its orientation, and yet there was a CPAC, the meeting, and we said they had excluded gay groups from the group, and we decided to sponsor with our free card, we always have a rainbow coalition, tolerance on the right. What is the other term we used? But basically let's have a discussion of this group in a broader sense. And the panel was spirited. There was some on the panel who wanted to see gay marriage. There was some who thought we didn't need gay marriage. There was some who thought, look, regardless of our differences, a free society is a tolerant society. We're not necessarily an affirmation society. I can disagree with you and still tolerate your views and so on. That was a very positive one. I think generally speaking, the movement, right of center movement, has more similarities than differences, but the major division is not between the ideologues, in my view, in the conservative movement and the ideologues in the libertarian movement. It's between our doers, the business community who sympathizes with our position, and ourselves. The intellectuals and the entrepreneurs barely talk to each other. On the left, the trial lawyers and the environmentalists, the unionist and the consumerist group work hand in glove. And those alliances, Baptists and bootleggers they're called normally, are very, very powerful, and we have never tried to do that. We're intellectuals. What does the business community know? The business community, we're doers. What the hell the pointy-headed intellectuals know? We need to find ways of creating more linkages, yes, of course, between conservatives and libertarians, but also between the business community who benefits from economic liberty and those of us who believe in the moral integrity and the moral superiority of economic liberty. And if we can do that, we're going to beat these bastards into the ground.